to season 3 of the Brain Fruits podcast. In this season, we will focus on how to engineer your future. We are so looking forward to get the advice and decision-making tools from our podcast guests that will help you thrive in the tech and finance sector. In this season, I talk with TEDx speakers, founders, and entrepreneurs that share their stories and advice to shape your emotional and financial success in the tech and finance sector. You can subscribe to Brain Foods on all major streaming platforms, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Please share us with a friend who might need some advice. Today, I welcome Alice McNeil. She's the program lead at Fresh Venture Studio. Fresh Venture launched in 2021, and she worked alongside founders to address the problem in the land and aquaculture food systems. Welcome, Alice. It's such a pleasure to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your startup trajectory to date?
Hey, Hannah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. It's a very interesting but difficult question to answer. And the reason for that is whenever I think about my trajectory, it's very hard to think about like particular turning points or like moments of clarity. And I think that's what I've kind of landed on for myself, at least, is that a lot of my journey actually in my career so far and also in my personal life has been really defined by the people that I'm surrounded by, and also a very heavy dose of serendipity. So I think everything that I have kind of done prior up to this moment has been a layering of these two influences on my life. And I think a really nice example of this is how I ended up working with Home Tree, which is a rewilding and land restoration charity in Ireland. Is that it really came about through a series of quite random introductions to a CSA farm in Ireland, where I ended up working there as a volunteer for a few months. I coincidentally met Matt, who was one of the founders of the farm, and while planting apple trees together, realized that we connected on quite a deep value level. And then fast forward 6 years later, we're still working together every day. I sit on the board of directors for this charity, and it's become a very core part of, I guess, my purpose and what I would describe as my purpose in my career. Really, the people who you are surrounded by, values that they hold and share with you are actually key drivers of purpose. I've been able to combine what was always, I thought, a kind of side passion or side hustle in conservation, in being in nature and feeling a very strong sense of stewardship of nature. And then actually my kind of professional career, which is in strategy, consulting, and business development. And Fresh is a place where actually those things are very beautifully dovetailed, because we focus on, the early, actually pre-idea and pre-team stages of innovation within the regenerative land and aquaculture spaces.
I really want to repeat that here again as well. I think you beautifully pointed out that it's a lot about how you connect with your surrounding over the values that you both share that can give you a sense of purpose and in the long term also a job. I mean, a lot of people, I think, have a bit the struggle to connect their purpose with their job level. But if you find that sweet spot of combining that with these new ventures, these new companies that we see that focus on sustainability, it is absolutely possible to get paid and feel like you're having a higher purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually something that we really focus in on at Fresh. We have two programs at the moment. One is an online course, which actually specifically focuses on this piece around how do you identify your role in the regenerative space? What is that actually, what kind of process or structure can you actually go through? Because we do believe that there is a methodology as well as serendipity there. And then we also have our entrepreneurial program, which is for people who have gone, right, actually a venture is my model, and I want to now find the venture. So they're a bit later in this journey for them. But what we look in on both of these programs is we use a methodology called Theory U, and it's always about, kind of through bending the beam back in on yourself and really trying to understand and identify your intrinsic drivers. And how they connect to your strengths and experiences, That's really where the sweet spot in venturing lies, because it's such a hard pathway.
But I would like to dive back a little bit when you say, okay, I met Matt planting apple trees and this is how we connected. And you also in the same breath said that you connected via values. How can I picture that? Do you stand with Matt under an apple tree? And are you going like, hey, Matt, what are your values? You want to work together?
Kind of rolling a little bit back about how I even ended up in the west of Ireland. It started actually as a good friend of mine, Johnny. He runs a series of masterclasses and courses around emotional resilience for founders and nervous system mastery. But he's also a surfer, and we surf together quite often. So he kind of said, hey, you really like farming. Why don't you go to this farm run by a group of surfers who I know? And it started as like a casual holiday plan. And then because that place has very deliberately been built as a place where people come together to fulfill a strong sense of stewardship and responsibility for the environment. That's how Fergal, Matt and Mitch founded Moy Hill Farm. Because it's a place that's deliberately set up as that, it attracts people who feel resonate, like that mission resonates with them.
Yeah.
And so I kind of actually deliberately went there to meet other people who shared that kind of mission. And I was there to learn, and I went there with quite a deliberate open heart. And also it's a place where they practice those routines to open people up and take the time and headspace as well.
Yeah.
And I think when you're involved in regenerative agriculture, you're so self-aware of everything that's happening around you because you're working with nature, not forcing it. And so it just happened to be this space where then getting to people's like values was really easy. I was just listening to what I felt I already had in me. And I think it's important at this point to really recognize how privileged that is to be able to even structurally take that time in your life. And I think especially for women who are still the majority carers and families, they're often at the center of the household. Structurally recognizing and then taking the time to look in on yourself is an indulgence for a lot of people. But I want more people to have that experience.
I really love that you also are very cautious and very humble about that you were able to take this time off in the planned fashion only because of your socioeconomic background, basically, right? And because of
absolutely
the previous jobs that you were holding. But we're also still very privileged when we talk about how we're able to use our global food system at the moment. Arguably, our global food system is the biggest and most important system on planet Earth, and it's in really bad shape. Our current food system, I think, long story short, is in pretty bad shape. What's the problem that you're solving with Fresh Ventures here?
It's a great question. So Fresh founders, so Hub, Bart, Shayna, and Chris, had identified that there was a whole community and a whole bunch of really crazy smart, crazy ambitious, crazy talented people, but probably maybe in the wrong places in their careers and what they were doing. And then on the other hand, very well established, very well known, very pressing structural problems, system problems in the food system, but very few ways to connect the two together. And Fresh is a venture studio, which means that it is a model where you take a very active role in co-founding ventures. And that can mean a bunch of stuff we can talk about. But what it also means is that you're working very early stage, pre-idea, pre-team with individuals to kind of bring them into, in a structural way, the right, I guess, entry point for them with their purpose and where they want to change that system. So what Fresh Ventures, what we do is we really act as that kind of bridge, which is why we run programs, because it helps people primarily de-risk the entrepreneurial journey for themselves. It's, as we've just already talked about, it's crazy scary and it's crazy risky. It's a really community driven kind of effort, which is also why we work in cohort based environments. So every year we bring together 35 entrepreneurs in our in-person program and on our online course, as many as possible, and really structurally help people make that connection between their intrinsic purpose, their crazy mad skill sets and strengths, and then actually the really pertinent problems that need to be solved in the food system.
How can these venture building programs like Fresh Venture help especially women entrepreneurs to tackle the world's most wicked problems?
So the thing is, like, we know that being a woman as an entrepreneur is harder, right?
Yeah.
It's like chances of raising funds are much lower. Chances of actually even getting into an entrepreneurial space are much lower. It really comes back to this de-risking, and de-risking in a way that is still ensuring that that entrepreneur is true to their purpose and also has ownership over that purpose as well. And I can explain what that means a little bit. But there are so many kind of benefits to going through quite an intense transition to being an entrepreneur in a cohort. You're surrounded by people who think like-minded and are mission-driven, but bring a diversity of knowledge and experience and expertise to you. And I think that's also, that kind of exposure is so important as a woman as well. It's really important to meet other female founders too,
Yeah.
and see precedent and understand, what works and what hasn't worked. You're getting, mentorship and coaching and shortcutting to expertise and insights that actually are harder to access as a woman as well. A lot of entrepreneurship is based on network externalities and having a good, healthy network. So Fresh really plays quite a strong role in getting you to that expertise and to those insights faster than perhaps you would do on your own. When we go forward with a venture to co-found with them in our studio, we follow a steward ownership model, which has really been pioneered by Purpose in Germany, where the entrepreneur owns and is always in control of the steering wheel of their own business, and where economic rights are therefore separated out. And I think for a woman, and of course I can only speak to my personal experience, but for a woman to have that kind of complete ownership over their own thing is quite rare. Actually, all of the ventures we have in the studio have female founders. One of them, Susanna, is also the only founder. She's started this Harvest Care on her own. And I think watching her and kind of working with her, it seems to be an incredibly powerful experience for her to be able to be like, this is what I would like to do. I'm in a structure where I'm fully supported and I have complete ownership over what it is that I am doing.
You talk a lot about building your personal money fund to get started. I'm also a big fan of that. I don't think it's a good idea to just start, plunge forward without any risk considerations to quit your job and start your own venture. I think this is also a little bit of the demystifying that we're trying to do with this podcast. It's not about just taking risks that are completely out of your appetite, but rather slowly diving into what it is you want to do. As you say, find your mission, find your values, connect with people that share those values, and start to get into organizations where you can connect with individuals and where you can get the support to structurally start your own company. What are 3 simple steps to build your personal money fund to get started? Like, how much do I really need to start my own company?
Money is always in your mind when you're an entrepreneur. It never stops. You're never not trying to fundraise or improve your financial health. I think personally for me, it started from maybe a bit of a different question, which was financial considerations and money aren't really about money. It's about your relationship to money, which is built up over many years with many different influences. And I think really understanding how you feel about money is actually a really important first step. I always thought, for whatever reason, I always had to have like a big cash lump sum somewhere, right? I was in London at the time. There's a lot of cultural talk around having a house deposit and knowing how much that is. And I really got stuck in this idea that I had to have like this big nest egg. And then I was like, but how am I going to get there when, I'm just a little junior analyst in my 20s, living in one of the most expensive cities in the world? And that's actually where the second step came in for me, which is realizing that actually cash flow is more powerful than per se like a nest egg. And healthy cash flow and having lots of different ways of generating that cash flow can be just as powerful. You don't need to own a house. You don't need to have these big financial assets and savings. Of course, that's very important to still have like a safety net, and things in life happen where you do need to have high cash outflow, but actually guaranteeing cash flow is just as important as a nest egg. I was focusing much more on that, the cash flow, and generating good, healthy cash flow as fast as possible, which I did through kind of a variety of different ways. First of all, I stopped using public transport in London completely. I cycled every day, anywhere, in any weather.
Wow, that's a great recommendation. just stop public transport and just start cycling. It also you I think you also saved the gym membership right away.
Raising your own fund is about you. And that's also why the third kind of step was about identifying which routines, habits, and accountability measures would actually really work for you. I personally don't need to tell people or have a buddy, for example, for a couple of different reasons, but some people really do. Some people really need someone to be like, no, remember, this is your goal, and you told me to tell you off every time you wanted to do, I don't know, there's a joke, right, around flat whites and avocado toast in our generation, which is completely misplaced. But, having someone who actually knows your plan as well, whether that's your partner or your best friend, or actually even, going through a online course where you have that accountability system.
Yeah. I love that angle. I'm a really big fan of accountability partners myself. I use them for everything, even for going to bed early. Sometimes I had a bit of a problem with that because I am easy to just kind of work away in the evenings, and then it's way too late. And that's not good for my health and for my mental health. Though I used to have a good friend of mine that would call me in the evenings and would be like, Hannah, are you in bed now?
That's awesome.
It works for absolutely everything. Career goals, personal goals, getting up in the morning to go to the gym, way easier if you have someone that you can do it with. The same as changing a small habit like going to bed early. I'm a big fan of accountability partners. Continuing with the next question that I had. So we talked a little bit about money and how to build your personal money fund, even with some actionable tips here from you, Alice, about things you can save on that don't provide you with as much value, such as, for example, a gym membership or public transport, and how you can substitute those things with another activity such as cycling to work. So I really love that you say, cash flow is key. It's not so much about having a big stack of money in the beginning. It's much more about how do you over time generate on a consistent basis with the product or service that you give out a consistent cash flow. You reframe also how you develop a solution to a problem. You call it loving the problem, which is a play that you use in building successful ventures. Can you tell us a little bit about a successful venture that has used loving the problem play approach to build a solution?
We love problems. Fresh. So all of our entrepreneurs go through this kind of method. It starts with problem loving and falling in love again with a particular problem. And that goes back to something we've already talked about, right? Which is the way in which problems and purpose are actually very intimately linked. They're two sides of the same coin, I guess, and really understanding why you're driven into trying to solve particular problems, and then actually making sure that the problem that you are trying to solve is a true problem. We use a systems thinking lens into understanding those problems, and it's about the dovetailing with that with each individual. I think a really lovely example of this emerging is actually Susanna, the founder of Harvest Care, and she is really driven by helping people understand and first of all, the connection between soil health and a healthy body. So she focuses on helping women who have endocrine problems. So whether that's PCOS or Hashimoto's disease or diabetes, for example, and understanding really how their diet and their nutrition really can fundamentally change your daily experience. The other flip side of that is also she wants to help farmers improve their economic livelihood as well. And so she's looking at this golden thread between how we grow and cultivate our food.
Yeah.
And then all the way through to the biochemical level of that in your body as a woman, which is crazy interesting. She came into the program, I think, already knowing in her heart that that's where she wanted to go. But it was then going through this process of, okay, let's look at the entire system. Let's really focus in on understanding the dynamics and why problems exist in the first place, and kind of re-falling in love again with what she already felt she wanted to work on. And it's why we actually spend so much time around this problem-loving piece is also, back to the fact that it's just really hard. And it's, if you connect deeply with something, you will surpass those difficult times. You will build that resilience. We do a lot of work around emotional resilience as well with our founders, and really helping them kind of know when it's time to push through versus when it's time to kind of change and look at something a bit differently as well.
This mental agility, I think, is a really interesting piece as well, that we have another episode on actually as well.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
But before we come to the end of our podcast, I would love to hear from you. If you can share some of your tips and advice, having heard about your success story with Fresh Ventures, what are some recommendations that you could give to our listeners to develop the confidence and the skills to start a personal fund, and then to test out whether or not building your own company is something for you?
Yeah, it's great question. I know this is often like much harder as a woman, first of all, but because we're not really asked this in society very often, but it really is about explicitly identifying what you want and what you need and articulating that. And I know that that's finding that confidence and finding the language in order to do that. It can be really hard, but it is something only you can define. And so being able to take the space and the time to structurally work on that as an individual is, I think, really critical to knowing what it is that you want and how you're going to do that, and if a venture pathway is the right one for you. I think there are a lot of entrepreneurial people in the world who have that skill set, but it may be that actually you don't need to found your own venture. You could join a startup, or you could join a big organization and be the entrepreneurial spirit in that organization. So really starting about explicitly looking into yourself and finding out actually how you can curate that space for yourself is really important. And to make that a little bit more tangible, because it sounds a lot easier than it actually is.
Yeah.
This is why, for me, who you surround yourself with is critical. It's why finding like-minded people, or people who have done it before you, or who share those values and are going through it at the same time, is super important. If I was to kind of think about turning points in my journey where that really mattered, meeting Matt, for example, with these apple trees was really important. But also when I really did push myself there, when it came to moving out of London and kind of changing path, I realized that actually there was maybe like one or two friends who really were that kind of, people for me. I think one of them in particular, Theo, he also had already founded his own company, and just having someone else to look at who had gone through it and be like, it's okay, it gets better, was really critical. And I was just very lucky to have met people like Theo, people like Matt through the outdoor community.
Yeah. I think having these role models is very key, very much key, as you say, to be able to even see what is possible, because often we don't have, we are so stuck, I think, easily about in the thought that, oh, I really want to do something, but I don't even know where to get started. Sometimes you see very successful entrepreneurs, or also, as you say, women up the ladder in corporates that just live out their entrepreneurial spirit. But how you actually get there is a very different story, and having people talk about that, having especially women share their stories and advice, I think is very much key to inspire more women to do the same.
Yeah, and the last thing I will say as well is a theme I talked about it already, which is serendipity. And it might be a bit unusual for a strategy person to say, don't be strategic or don't be too strategic. Sometimes actually doing nothing is quite great and brings a lot of value. And I think, sometimes people feel like they need to have this like super high level detailed worked out plan where everything has kind of been scenario analyzed. And I have that tendency myself. I'm enough of an Excel nerd to do that. But actually, I've learned personally for myself that sometimes it is just about accidentally ending up in the right place in the right time. Allow yourself to have serendipity happen to you. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to plan everything. You don't need to kind of execute this elaborate plan. Sometimes you just need to go and do things you really enjoy, and then you'll end up meeting people who open up a new pathway for you.
I think we're the best when we are enjoying what we're doing anyways. Absolutely. It's like the order of things for me is often first enjoy what you do, no matter what. We're not anchored in the now enough to enjoy the activities we're doing, or we have life comes to you and you end up in the right space. Where can people find you?
Good. So Fresh, we're based in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, but we actually, our program is European wide. So if you're interested in either trying to identify your role in the regenerative food space, or you already know you want to join or build your own venture, come check us out on our website. Feel free to just call me. I love being randomly called by excited people. And so I'd say that LinkedIn also, we have a page there. We've got events coming up this summer. I'm going to be doing a bunch of Q&As over the coming months to answer any questions you have about becoming an entrepreneur, or why you should be in the food space, or how to kind of get into the food space more. And then you can always find me at a farm somewhere. That's just where I find myself a lot of the time.
Thank you, Alice. This was such a great episode. I really enjoyed it. It was such a great talk, starting from connecting with people under apple trees to talking about money, your relationship with money. I think this is so important to dive into, and to also often heal some traumas, and sharing some actionable advice from your side on how you could start to build your personal money fund and what it takes to really be a successful entrepreneur in the impact space. Thank you for being part of the Brain Food Show. And
thank you, Hannah. This is such a nice way to start a Monday morning also.
Great. That's great. We should do this much more. Yes. Thank you so much.